It turns out EVs emit far worse particle pollution. The UN appoints a trans-identifying man who is boasted about wearing his sister's underwear. 30% of migrants traveling through Mexico tested positive for syphilis and other STDs. And while Volodymyr Zelensky traveled south with the Greek prime minister, a Russian missile struck near his motorcade. All that in your quick hits coming right now. What's up, guys? I'm your host, Cam Higby, and this is the wrap-up, where we break down the biggest stories of the week that you might have missed but definitely need to know. After being cited in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, an emissions analytics study which claims that EVs create more harmful emissions than traditional cars has resurfaced. The study claims that today brakes and tires are where the majority of modern vehicle pollution comes from. As synthetic tires made from crude oil wear out, harmful chemicals are released into the air. As we discussed on a previous episode of the wrap-up, EVs are roughly 30% heavier on average than standard cars. This means that the tires and brakes on EVs wear out much faster. The study concludes that there is a trade-off. Electric cars produce roughly 50% less CO2 emissions, but emit more particles into the environment. These particles have less effect on climate change, but more on the air that we breathe and the food that we eat. In addition, EVs are most often charged via city power grids, which are often run on fossil fuels. Electricity doesn't magically materialize out of nowhere. The United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, which is dedicated to the empowerment of women around the world, has selected a trans-identifying man to be the delegate for the UK. Martin Katie Neves is the freshly chosen delegate. In 2022, footage of Neves during a DEI training webinar came to light. He said publicly, "My earliest memories were of my mom catching me trying on a pair of my sister's knickers. I remember when I did it. It felt so right." At this point, the UN is known for its hilariously ironic decision-making. For example, allowing the Iranian envoy to chair a Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva. Meanwhile, the UN-appointed human rights experts themselves accuse Iran of committing crimes against humanity. Now a man posing as a woman has been appointed to a council devoted to the empowerment of women. What could be more inspiring to a woman than a man in disguise taking her job? Crime isn't the only thing our open border is plaguing America with. An NGO provided free STD testing in southern Mexico. The tests were primarily given to people who had entered Mexico from Guatemala. The testing revealed that for every 10 migrants, 3 have syphilis or another sexually transmitted disease. The group who handed out the test notes that there's a significant rise in syphilis cases, especially in people coming out of Cuba, but there is no rise in HIV cases. Thousands of migrants arrive in southern Mexico every single day, journeying to the United States where they intend to cross the southern border illegally. Migrants seem to have learned that they will be allowed to cross in droves, leading to the mass cross-continental trip that so many have taken. Meanwhile, the Mexican government uses immigration as a point of negotiation for more money and aid in exchange for help with the issue. While Volodymyr Zelensky traveled south through the city of Odessa with the Greek prime minister, a Russian missile struck near his motorcade. Zelensky and the Greek prime minister met at the site of a residential building which had been bombed out in early March. The attack killed roughly a dozen people, and Zelensky stressed that the Russians do not care where they strike or who they harm, as is evidenced by the strike the pair witnessed. Zelensky explained that he is certain people were wounded and killed in the attack, but he does not have the details at present. It is alarming that Ukrainian officials side by side with other global leaders are just traveling through the war-torn landscape of Ukraine, especially after Ukraine's own interior minister was killed during a helicopter crash in Kiev. What would happen if the leader of Greece, a NATO-allied nation, was killed? That would undoubtedly escalate the war and could potentially see other NATO nations dragged into the conflict. As far as Americans go, our president, our Secretary of State, our Secretary of Defense, our Secretary of Transportation, Nancy Pelosi and other members of Congress, and even Jill Biden, the First Lady, have all visited Ukraine since the war broke out. And now it's time for your quick hits. Halo composer Marty O'Donnell announced that he is running for Congress as a Republican. The left is melting down on X. One user said, "It's sad to see that the original composer of #Halo, Marty O'Donnell, supports Israel." Dune 2, featuring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, is crushing the box office, collecting $81.5 million in its opening weekend. Doritos' transgender brand ambassador has been canned after sexual comments about 8 and 12-year-old girls on social media. He says they were, quote, meant to be funny. Many outlets reported last week that Twitter had rolled back its free speech policy, which did not force users to comply with preferred gender pronouns. Today, when you look at X's Help Center, a sentence precedes that policy, which says, "where required by local laws." The VA Assistant Secretary for Health and Operations attempted to ban this iconic image of a sailor kissing a nurse in Times Square after the end of World War II was announced, and then quickly reversed it after outrage. The nurse's granddaughter came forward to say that her grandma was actually proud of the image. And Nikki Haley has dropped out of the presidential race. That's all I have for you this week, guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, let me know what you thought of these stories down below, and I'll see you right here next week on The Wrap-Up. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.